Heavy bantamweights on the cusp of the rankings. Squaring off this weekend in Abu Dhabi, we have the Snow Leopard, Javid Basharat, taking on La Mangosta, Victor Henry, and I got to level with everybody here. This is probably one of my favorite fights on this card.
One.
This is an all-timer. If you like Christian Rodriguez, Cameron Simon,
you step too far.
Last weekend, you're going to like this fight. Javid Basharat's one of those guys, and you knew when he was facing competition in England, it wasn't really the best of guys, but he's beating them in ways that really did impress. And for Victor Henry, this is one of those guys that ruined some guy's sitting there smoking the dank herb, and I just ruined his night. But for Victor Henry, he was knocking on the door of the UFC for the longest time. Henry with a win over Kyler Phillips outside of the UFC, with a win over Anderson Dos Santos that ended up in the UFC, and of course you remember him for his time over with Ryzen and Deep Jules, getting wins over Trent Girdham, Masanori Kanehara, Denis Lavrentiev, and the like. Yuki Matoya as well. Some big names over there in Japan. And Victor Henry, being that, not unknown, but being that American, traveling over to Asia to get wins over guys that maybe you didn't expect him to, that really is a feather in his cap. Now, against Lavrentiev, 1-1, so it is what it is. But for Victor Henry, the win over Albert Morales by finish, the UFC vet over with LXF, got him a fight against Raoni Barcelos as a big underdog. And boy, oh boy, was he able to cash out there. So, Matt, this really is the story of why did Craig Allen wear a long snapper's practice jersey on the video? It's because some of these big-time long shot underdogs will have a good shot. And when you look at Victor Henry in the UFC, the win over Raoni Barcelos, a loss to a good boxer in Rafael Assunção.
That's what a win over Raoni does to you, right? And you're going to get a difficult fight your next time.
And then a really, really close fight where he's able to get the win over Tony Gravely and send him happy trails packing outside of the UFC. Really, both these guys with wins over Tony Gravely, a guy who I wish was still in the UFC. I like Tony Gravely fights. But Matt, for Javid Basharat, again, this is a guy that you knew from more common ways where he gets that win over Oran Kalon, who of course missed the weight, talked big smack before that fight, and he had to eat it. I went over Trevin Jones, Tony Gravely, and then his last time out, Mateus Mendonça, who poured it on in that first round against Basharat. I think this is going to be a really good fight of who's going to be the advancing party, and if it is Victor Henry, I've answered my question. Can Javid Basharat do enough moving laterally and on the back foot to beat Victor Henry here?
You know what I'm about to say about Javid Basharat. When are we going to see a finish in the UFC?
That's true.
He has all the skills in the world. He really does. He is a great striker. And like you say, the question has to be asked because he can strike moving backwards. He can move left to right. He is that talented of a striker on just with his movement in general, really, to where, okay, that's all great. But if you really are this minus, 425 favorite against Victor Henry, who's been there and done that, then it would be nice to, at some point in your UFC tenure, at least go out there and really start putting it on people. Because Basharat, to me, just fights at a very consistent pace. And I think it speaks to you mentioning that he can get a little flustered at moments during fights because he likes to just maintain his pace, kind of in that Luka way, if you will, right? Luka Doncic doesn't run really fast, he doesn't jump really high. He just plays at his pace the whole entire game. And for Javid Basharat, when he's able to fight at his own pace and implement his combinations, throw the knees up the middle, really get his lower half involved in the fight, then he can be a really talented striker. But that's what I worry about in this fight and why I think this fight is so much fun. Victor Henry's the guy who's going to be in your face for all 15 minutes, and he's an active guy, not only with the takedowns, but with his striking as well. And I do wonder, can Javid Basharat not match him with the pace? Because I don't think at the end of this fight, if it does go to a decision, that Javid Basharat's going to have, 70 more significant strikes. Maybe he does just, he's able to hurt him a couple of times, land a lot of ground and pound shots, but he's going to make sure the strikes that he does land are significant enough to make up for the fact that Victor Henry is going to be in his face for the whole thing. And that's why, even if he doesn't get a finish in this fight, and that's something I've been harping on since the beginning, it might not be a bad thing, because I think we would learn a lot about Basharat and getting a decision win over Henry, because it's going to prove that his pace is good enough to beat, maybe not elite fighters, because Victor Henry's not elite, but really talented fighters who are very well-rounded.
The craziest thing about this, and again, these two guys limited in UFC experience for sure. For Victor Henry, 2-1 in the UFC, a champion in other major organizations on the way in. For Javid Basharat, he has only had the 3 fights as well. He is 3-0. He's undefeated as a pro. And of course, he touched on it. The finishes outside of the UFC against less than stellar guys. Now he needs to up it as it goes on. Usually that's a talking point that the broadcast will bring too. But
if I could, Basharat, the one thing about him that I do like, we don't have the question marks about the third round cardio, right? It's not like, hey, he throws a crazy pace round 1 and 2 and then we have those question marks. At least we know, hey, for 15 minutes, he's pretty steady.
He's got really good footwork no matter which way he's trying to go. For Victor Henry, he's a lot better when he is rolling and moving forward, but that could be afforded to him against a guy like Basharat that will fight on the retreat.
Exactly.
And when you look at it just by the numbers, 3 fights each, Victor Henry lands on average 3 more significant strikes a minute compared to Javid Basharat. It's like 8.67 to 5.64 in favor of Henry, but Javid Basharat getting hit at about just over 2 strikes per minute, 66% strike defense. Only 3 fights, but that's pretty darn good for Basharat. He's a massive favorite in this fight. We have a look at the Topology votes, Matt. Surprise to us there, to you. I'm going to say over under 77.5% Basharat.
I think it's going to be like the 90s for him.
Oh my. 1,204 total votes, 95% Basharat, 78% by decision for the 5% that of Henry, 77% by decision. Matt, who do you have in the fight?
I have Javid Basharat because I think the knees at the middle are going to be really important. I bring up the Cowboy Cerrone Eddie Alvarez fight probably too often if we're being honest, but it's a fight that does show if you can land great knees up the middle, it does not only take the gas out of your opponent, keeps them from shooting takedowns, and they are damaging shots, and I think Basharat's going to be able to use some of those check knees up the middle to halt some of the forward pressure of Victor Henry. It's not going to make him fight like a different fighter. He's not going to turn into Uriah Hall and just be on the retreat the whole time, but it's going to eliminate some of the positives he brings into the cage, and for those reasons, I have Basharat.
I want to take Victor Henry. We're tied on the year as far as picks are concerned, and I don't let that come into play just until the end of the year. I want to take Victor Henry. I'm going to take Javid Basharat in this one, but I'm going to kick myself if Victor Henry wins. I'll put it that way. I'm going with Javid Basharat in the fight. I think for the reasons that you mentioned, and again, Victor Henry can walk himself into some of these shots as well. His strike defense can struggle against some of those upper echelon guys. Tony Gravely was able to hit him with some of those really big hooks that he has. And for Victor Henry, again, if he's constantly having to defend some of those body shots, it brings his hands down that much more, and it opens up the game with Javid Basharat. So again, I'm on the fence with this one. I was going to take Victor Henry as a sexy underdog, but both of us in the fight going with Javid Basharat to get the win. Please let us know on these ones who you have down below in the comments section.
Does Basharat fight a ranked fighter if he wins this?
Yeah, I think either guy with a win gets to fight a ranked opponent next. Maybe if it's not a ranked opponent, it's Cody Garbrandt, even though Basharat's been training with Cody Garbrandt at Extreme Couture. But again, some breadcrumbs for the next one. Some big time fights in this card, Matt, that people are not going to want to miss. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.